5,800 pounds, that's only 2.5 tons. We can use this road. Time to drive the Lotus Eletre. To be honest, I don't know which number to emphasize first in this here Lotus Eletre R. Is it the 905 horsepower, the 726 pound-feet of torque? Or is it the 5,820 pounds? That is so many pounds, my God. Horsepower, whatever, you can't use much of that. But that weight, you're carrying all the time. And I know it seems like I'm just jumping right into it, but that really does set the tone for this vehicle. Coming in to attack the likes of the Cayenne Coupe, the Turbo GT, the Lambo Urus, or even the new electric Macan, this here Eletre is a big, heavy, very generously equipped, and I must say, very high-performing electric crossover. Offered in 3 trims, base, luxury S, or this here performance-focused R, you get quite a bit of battery, 111 kilowatts in fact, 109 usable there. We don't actually have official EPA or NRCan numbers, but that should hypothetically convert to about 500 kilometers range on those lower models, or on this top one, 420. You'd pay for performance. It's a serious setup too. Lotus, now owned by Geely, the same group that also owns Polestar and Volvo, has fitted a very slick platform beneath this. It's an 800 volt, 350 kilowatt architecture. Like the Hyundai Ioniq 5, that means some really serious charge speeds. Hypothetically, even with this enormous battery, you can go 10 to 80% in as few as 20 minutes. If you get a 22 kilowatt wall box fitted at your house, that should be good for 6-hour charge overnight. If you just use a regular dryer plug though, at what ends up being about 5.5 kilowatts, you're looking at a 24-hour charge time. Of course, with all that humdrum EV stuff out of the way, the real news here is that this is a Lotus. There aren't many of those around to begin with, let alone Lotuses with any broad appeal. So long a niche brand catering to a very enthusiastic driver who prioritized lightweight and handling and just enough power to chuck all that around, this then, as the brand's first SUV, is a pretty significant departure. Have they pulled it off? Well, it depends who you ask and what your metrics are. As a comfortable, tourable SUV, it's quite nice. It's really plush. The technology in here is really quite spectacular. Benefiting from that Volvo Polestar connection, we have really slick sensor technology in here. The LiDAR module that pops out of the roof, those that pop out of the front arches, the excellent lane keeping and adaptive cruise control, and hypothetically, preparedness for level 4 autonomy if and when that is approved for use on these roads. This thing is built to be future-proofed, and I've got to say, it comes across quite credibly. Hailing from the Chinese market, Geely is a force, and a lot of this stuff, be it the infotainment that was originally developed for Lynk & Co EVs, or some of the performance bits that were refined on the Zeekr models, it really brings something of a modern best of the best. And that's welcome, because Lotus back there in Hethel in England hasn't always had all that many resources behind it. Tossed around between ownership over the last few years, the company has had a rough go, and of course, never really had all that much to work with in the first place. This is part of why the brand's ethos was always simple, lightweight, and straightforward. They were race-inspired in spirit, but also by necessity. And that, of course, brings us to some of the disappointment here. You see, this is quite an impressive vehicle, but it's difficult to make such a hefty vehicle handle in the way that a sports car would. Audi and Lamborghini within the Volkswagen Group, and particularly Porsche there, have actually achieved some pretty impressive handling dynamics in their larger crossovers. And even the Jaguar F-Pace SVR that I was testing on similar P0 tires on this same route just recently did actually afford a somewhat dynamic drive. This, however, leans more toward that Jaguar end of the spectrum than the Porsche VW. This has a lot of power, and that can be exciting, but it is hefty, and it kinda lurches about. Notably too, what seems a somewhat simple traction control system has been a little bit jerky when you're really putting the power down. Like in a Jag, it just cuts, and well, not necessarily to quite the duration that bothers drivers in the Jaguar models, even when you have it in track mode, which is relatively uninhibited and will let the tail come out, it still just catches and startles you. Of course, that also brings us to that power, which is tremendous. Depending on models, you're looking at either 603 horsepower in the lower two trims, or in this case, that 905 figure. Combined with the 726 pound-feet of torque, Lotus says that this thing will do 0 to 100 in 2.95 seconds in optimal conditions. That is a big caveat, of course, and in the lower models, you're looking at something more like 4 seconds. That is cool. It's a fun party trick that passengers enjoy trying a couple times. Beyond that, though, that sort of highlights some of the disappointment in this model, which is that it becomes a little bit of a one-trick pony. Yes, it can accelerate, but all of these high-performance EVs can accelerate. That's really the easiest thing to do. With all that power, you can actually coax it into some wiggles, and those are fun. But again, power for power's sake is only so useful or enjoyable in the everyday. And whereas competitors like the Porsche Taycan manage to blend a unique character and exciting sound and all of that into the equation, this doesn't. What it gets instead is really a high-strung, familial feeling. This thing is really pleasant to drive. It's really quite comfortable. These 12-way electric seats are just bolstered enough to feel somewhat sporting, but they're still accommodating to a large variety of body types. The rear seating is surprisingly okay as well, and if you fold those down, well, they don't go completely flat, you have a lot of space in the back there. Indeed, even with the seats up, the boot is tremendous. And wrapped around all of that, of course, is this phenomenally handsome cabin. This is a very unique vehicle which takes a very interesting approach. Here in the center, we have a very large central display. Then flanking that are a pair of very narrow strip displays, one for the driver, one for the passenger. At just over an inch tall and about a foot wide, the driver readout gives you all that you need in a very tidy package. But there again, that's not even the real highlight, because we have a huge, very bright head-up display projected in the windscreen here. That HUD integrates particularly well with the advanced driver assistance in this thing. That HUD makes particularly good use of all of the Eletra's sensor readouts, though you get a more detailed display here in the center screen, which actually even will show you individual pedestrians and pylons. It's wonderfully detailed. That there gives you all that you need, and it's right in your peripheral. This is quite easily my new favorite head-up display in any vehicle, even with sunglasses on. It's just excellent. On the passenger side, the little strip is actually a touchscreen too, so they can do whatever it is a passenger needs to do. We've got another screen down here on the back of the center console for the rear passengers. Both outer positions can control their own climate. This is a car with quad zone climate control. And then of course you've got the other usual comforts, the heated steering wheel, the heated seating, the dual pane windows, front and rear in fact, the power lift gate, the power steering column. It goes on and on and on. But the thing is, it goes on beyond what's necessary. For those of us who look to this vehicle out of excitement for the Lotus brand, that old simplify and add lightness concept, that is out the window here. This screen has an extra motor worked in behind it so that it can fold itself up when you turn it off. There's no reason for this. It doesn't expose a cubby. It's literally just a gimmick for the sake of having it do something, so that someone gets in and says, oh, that's neat. The glove box is also open by pressing a button which triggers a little servo motor which releases the catch. We have a great big and, I must say, lovely panoramic and electrochromic glass roof here, which can brighten or dim automatically or per your settings. Also customizable in a similar vein is the ambient mood lighting stripped throughout. It's really nicely done. It can be made a little too bright, but you can dial it back, set a nice color, and it's just soothing. Then of course you've got the premium audio, 1380 watts. It pumps really well, and especially with Dolby Atmos settings, it adds a lot of depth thanks to clever reverb controls. Unfortunately, like in a lot of the Jaguar products I've tested though, it is a little too powerful for its own good. Cranked right up, I definitely clocked some rattles in this thing, and those weren't the only issues or disappointments. The gold finishes scattered throughout the cabin, for instance, are a really neat little nod to the old JPS liveries. With that being said, here they look a little cheapy chromy plastic. It's not exactly what I would want to see in a $250,000 vehicle. The wireless charger down here is there, it ticks the box, it works. However, there isn't really any shelf to retain a phone from flying back even under moderate acceleration. There also isn't a lot of at-hand storage. There's a central cubby here, which is very deep, and of course we've got the usual door pockets as well. but it's not quite the broad open experience that we've come to expect from some of these EVs with their skateboard architectures. In the center here too, these disappearing cup holders are really neat. They're the pop-up headlights of cup holders. You can push them down or you pop them back up and they stay flush with the leather armrest. That does seem a little short-sighted on the cleaning and longevity side of things, but I suppose that's the price you pay for glamour. Finally too, there are still some kinks to be worked out. I've been running this thing around with this little NFC card as a key because, as far as I can glean, the key fob is not working. There's been a lot of discussion about these things and the key fob's dying, sometimes within days. This is our solution, and it means that I have to tap it on the B-pillar, which actually has started to scratch the B-pillar on this unit already. When I get in, I have to set it down here on the wireless charger and not forget it, especially if I'm gonna floor it because it disappears between the seats. Regrettably too, for a car that's still so early in its lifespan, it already looks like this. Now, it must be said that that $250,000 figure is just an estimate. We don't actually have official pricing here. But based on conversion from estimates of US pricing, we're looking at a pricing structure of likely about 150,000 Canadian for the base model, 180,000 for the upgraded S, the luxury trim, and in the case of this here R, 210,000. Add in your luxury tax and probably tick some boxes like the optional AP Racing 10 piston front brakes, and you're looking at about $250,000. I'm honestly kind of bummed about this Eletre. I mean, I know that it's not Lotus as we know and actually want Lotus to be. Geely simply bought what is a known performance nameplate so that they could have a performance brand. Fair enough. And I mean, if it keeps it alive and we still get a little bit of something, then cool. That being said, it's not even that it feels cynical. It just feels like they didn't really know what they were working with. And I don't even mean this in the tired old, oh, simplify and add lightness, haha, it's really heavy. Yeah, it's really heavy, but the thing is that they haven't really done much other than just make it fast. And yeah, going fast is fun for a bit, but most of your driving is just like this. And when you're driving just like this in something like an Elise, it still feels special. It's fun, it's exciting. There's so little around you that everything is buzzy and it feels faster. I'm doing 50 right now, and I have gone 50 in an Elise on this stretch, and it's still been satisfying. Here, I'm in a crossover. Again, a very comfortable crossover. Yes, I've got my steering, actually I don't have my steering wheel heater going right now because there was some phantom drain and I woke up this morning to find the car awake for some reason, even though I locked it and it went to sleep last night, and I had lost 11% of my charge, which significantly impacted our plans for today. As it is now, I have my HVAC off. I'm down to 8%. It says 32 kilometers, so I should be fine for these final 5 kilometers to return it. But I just want rid of it. And that feels like a preposterous thing to say about a car with 905 horsepower with 726 pound-feet of torque. Like, this should be fun as hell. And yeah, it sort of is. And yes, it'll let it skip about a bit. It's got a 2-speed rear, actually, which is unusual for an EV. That's like Taycan style. So you get really good launches and you get really good top end too. Like, this thing pulls on the highway. But I don't trust it. It's a pre-prod, it's gonna be a little bit buggy. But you know, for a while I was sitting in it last night after dropping a friend off, and the air suspension just kept raising and lowering itself for no real apparent reason. I wasn't changing drive modes, I was just sitting and it just for like 20 minutes it kept doing that. Again, it's funny though because it's not even the buggy stuff that I'm worried about. I don't care that this gold chrome trim feels really cheap and plasticky because, I mean, it's a Lotus. It's allowed to feel a little bit ramshackle. I mean, of course, they're not built in an English shed anymore. They're built in China, and that's fine. China builds good stuff nowadays. It's just meh. Nothing feels special here. It just is. Lotus is really keen to call this thing a hyper SUV, and yes, 905 horsepower is very impressive, but the thing is, we've come to expect that sort of ridiculous party trick power from top-end EVs. A vehicle needs to deliver a lot, and in a very special way, to justify a take-home price tag that's probably going to be toward $250,000 here in Canada. This thing does a fair bit, and it's very pleasant to be in. but I'm not sure that this, especially as a Lotus, gives us the sort of sporting experience that I want for that money. With that being said, if you want a comfortable, luxurious, and really impressively equipped electric SUV, this thing does hit a lot of those notes. It is a pleasure to drive in traffic. It's a very easy place to be. The sound is phenomenal. It's a great luxury SUV. I'm just not sure it's a great Lotus. For Driving.ca, I'm Al Alder. For more EV news, reviews, previews, specs, and all the rest, be sure to follow us online on Driving.ca and check out our socials.
This is intro Lotus Emira.
I don't think they can hear you, but this is intro Lotus Emira.
I can always hear. Anyways, this is intro Lotus Eletre.
Oh yeah, it's the different one. It's the Eletre. I should pronounce it a different way each time.
Weak or something.
What a dumb name.